Welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight, October 9th, 2020, for the Emeryville City Council Candidate Forum. My name is Adina Ishii of the League of Women Voters of Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville. The League of Women Voters is a non-partisan organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. We do not support or oppose candidates or parties. The advocacy arm of the League may take positions on issues such as ballot measures. However, this forum is presented by the Voter Services and Education arm of the League, which does not take positions or advocate for them. I'd like to remind everyone that the candidates have all agreed to participate under ground rules set for this forum. These ground rules are posted in Eventbrite. Candidates are not permitted to display campaign buttons, t-shirts, signs, Zoom backgrounds, etc. in order to maintain neutrality. We are recording tonight's forum and the session will be available on our website, lwvbae.org, through votersedge.org, with links on our social media accounts at LWVBAE. There are three candidates running for Emeryville City Council. They are Ali Medina, John Bouders, and Christian Patz. On your ballot, you will be able to choose 3 out of the 3 candidates. So as I've mentioned earlier, there are not any new challengers. Now let's go over a few ground rules. Each candidate has 2 minutes for opening remarks. The order was determined by drawing lots. The timekeeper will signal candidates with a green colored window, which will count down the seconds from 2 minutes to 15 seconds to go when it will turn yellow, and then red when the full 2 minutes is up. As people signed up via Eventbrite, they could submit written questions. If you have additional questions, you may type them in by clicking the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Our volunteers will take the questions and pass them to the moderator. All questions will be screened to avoid duplication and personal attacks. The order of answering the questions will be alternated, and each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. Again, the timekeeper will signal candidates. There will be no separate rebuttals. However, the candidates may choose to use some or all of their 1 minute to rebut the response given by another candidate. Following the questions, each candidate shall have 1 minute for a closing statement. Now let's begin with our first candidate for the evening, Christian Patz. Christian, you have 2 minutes to give an opening statement.
Thank you. I first want to start by thanking the League of Women Voters of Berkeley, Albany, and Emeryville. I think in this day and age, civic engagement is really crucial. I don't think it's ever been as important as it is today. And so efforts like this are incredible. This is my 3rd election cycle as a candidate, and it was a highlight of my previous 2 elections, coming out to these forums and really being able to engage with the community, engage with the other candidates. This year is a little different. We will not actually be on the ballot because as a cost-saving measure, we decided to not waste the city's money when there were no contested seats. And I have to say, for me, these last 3.5, almost 4 years now have been incredible. I have the pleasure of serving with an incredible council. Even if we were in a contested election, the people I'm here with tonight have done an amazing job representing the city. And over the last few years, we've maintained a very well balanced budgets. We're highly rated in the state. We have pushed through a couple of ballot measures to increase support for the community, whether it be our housing measure or our public safety measure. We've really worked together as a team to bring together the best that is in Emeryville. And so I just want to encourage people who are watching tonight to be sure to make it to your polls and vote, get involved. We have lots of openings in June on our different boards and committees. And I know our school board is looking for candidates. So I won't take my full 2 minutes, but I want to just, again, appreciate everybody that's here this evening and participating. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for correcting me. I really appreciate that. I want folks to know that although you cannot vote for your Emery City Council council members on your ballot, that you will be able to vote for plenty of other things. So make sure, as Christian said, that you go to the polls. Next up is John.
Hi, thanks for inviting me to be here this evening, and thanks for putting together an event amid COVID at a time when we can't be together to have this forum as we normally do. I'm happy to know that people can still engage their city council members and candidates for elections via volunteers like the League over a safe forum like this. I will echo the things that my colleague Mayor Patz said, which is I'm very proud to serve with himself and Council Member Medina. The three of us, among the five of us on the city council, while we may not always agree on all of the issues, we have an immense amount of respect and collaborative partnership that has afforded us the opportunity to be a leader here in the East Bay on a number of important issues. I decided to run for re-election to continue the work that's already begun on housing, transportation, environment, sustainability, and social justice issues. And I look forward to continuing those things in the coming 4 years and to working with my colleagues on achieving those things. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Last but not least, Allie.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd also like to thank the League of Women Voters for setting up these forums. It's difficult to find nonpartisan ways to engage with voters, and this is an excellent way for the community to see who we are and what we've been up to, whether or not we're going to be on the ballot in fall. And so I appreciate having this opportunity. As my colleagues have said, we're fortunate to serve together for the last 4 years. It was my first time ever running for public office, and I think I got really, really lucky to be on this city council. One of the things that's most frequently noted by people from outside the city is the decorum that our council displays at the dais. And I think that's what enabled us to make so much progress on affordable housing and transportation. And there's no group of people I'd rather march into a global pandemic with than the people that I already sit with on my city council.
Great. Now it's time for the candidates to answer your questions. We have some questions that were gathered by the Evil Eye. And the first one is, and by the way, we'll be starting with John. What do you feel your biggest accomplishment has been over the last 4 years? And explain to Emeryville residents how this has benefited them and or our city.
Forgot to unmute there. Thank you for the question. If I was to look back at the biggest policy achievement, if I was to quantify it that way, I would say it would be Measure C. Measure C was a $50 million affordable housing bond that the voters passed in 2018 by a 73% margin of support in favor of having the city have the authority to build up to 500 additional units and leverage state, regional, and federal funding to deliver affordable housing. The city has been working on the expenditure plan, coming up with how to spend $50 million and make sure you can leverage as much other money as possible. Is a very lengthy process, but we're nearing the end of that process. And I look forward to the city making investments in a number of projects. We already anticipate that 3600 San Pablo, which will offer us about 90 units of permanent supportive housing, will be one of the first recipients of those funds. And I'm very proud of the fact that the city of Emeryville is able to deliver housing to people of all incomes because of it.
Great, thanks. Allie?
I think the accomplishment I'm proudest of is our council's incredibly rapid response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The weekend that it first hit, Councilmember Butters and I spent a ton of time over the phone drafting an emergency eviction moratorium ordinance for renters and for businesses and engaging with our business community immediately. And we're also able to put in some infrastructure changes to allow for social distancing, including shutting down part of Doyle Street to allow for more community open space. I think that these fast changes have had a lasting impact on the community.
Great, thank you. Christian?
I almost forgot to unmute there. I will echo what my colleagues said. I think those are the two big things. I've been serving as mayor this year during both the pandemic crisis and the racial unrest, and knowing that we've been out ahead of these things has really just, to me, shown the ability of this council and the councils before us to really be out in front and do things. So having passed Measure C, working on housing, I had the pleasure of being at the opening for Estrella Vista, which, while not part of Measure C, still shows our commitment to housing. I'm looking forward to seeing what we do at 3600 San Pablo, the COVID response, and really just being there during all of the, being mayor during all the recent racial unrest and having the conversations that we're having both in public and behind the scenes with the police, and dealing with, keeping the public safe while still keeping the public itself safe as well. So those are the things that I would list.
Great, thank you. So for our next question, we will start with Allie. And Over the last 4 years, property crime has gone up, affordability has gone down, small businesses are struggling, and our city's percentage of Black residents continues to drop, down to 14% in the latest census figures. What metrics do you point to indicate Emeryville is going in the right direction?
You know, one, I think, fantastic metric we can point to is the state auditor's report that shows that Emeryville has made significant progress towards the financial health of our city amid severe economic challenges with Halper's economic hit. I think we have increased the minimum wage, held high labor standards, and have worked to increase active transportation throughout our city. I think those metrics, increasing the amount of people who can move and walk through our city safely, are ones that I use to rate our safety.
Okay. And, I think I've mixed up the order, but I think maybe Christian is next.
That's what I think as well. You know, I think as we track these metrics, they tell varying stories. They have to be taken in a regional context. We have become one of the most expensive areas, not just Emeryville, but the Bay Area in general, whether it's Berkeley or Oakland. And, you know, we are a nexus point, and so that brings things in. I was looking at the property crimes yesterday at the public safety meeting, and they've dropped precipitously because we don't have out-of-towners using our hotels. So we've solved the property crime thing in absolutely the wrong way. You know, it's that these things happen because of our location, and we have done exactly what Member Medina just listed as the incredible ways to help deal with these things, whether it's maintaining our minimum wage, whether it's looking at affordable housing, whether it's improving our transit and infrastructure. That's what makes Emeryville desirable, and that's what makes us, you know, and our location is why we're all here. It's the nexus of the Bay Area, so we have these regional challenges.
Thank you. John?
On the housing question, as we've mentioned, we've done Measure C. We have 3 different fully 100% affordable housing projects in process. We did a tenant protection ordinance, a just cause eviction ordinance, a smoke-free housing ordinance, a lead abatement ordinance that's been recognized by the EPA. We've done a lot to improve the livability of housing. The city doesn't have much say in the way of rent control, but thankfully a new state law that caps the amount that rent can be increased will hopefully help temper the unpredictable nature of rental changes. As the mayor noted, we are part of a greater region. Emeryville is not in isolation here. And the same is true for property crimes. There's a regional issue there, and our city has collaborated with about 15 other cities in the East Bay that are collectively facing this problem to identify and work together to deal with the organized crime rings that have been targeting vehicles and people who are from out of town along our freeway corridors. And as for small business, we've been very responsive during COVID. We put in 12 months worth of rent and eviction protections for small businesses, and we've done other things to lift the small business programs up during the recent months.
Thank you. For our next question, Alameda County Supervisor Scott Haggerty recently suggested that small cities like Emeryville should consider merging with neighboring cities to avoid economic hardship amid the pandemic. This seems unlikely, but do you see any benefits to shifting any policy decisions and administrative roles to the county or even state level? And we'll start with Christian.
You know, I think there is a lot to be said for partnering with our neighbors. And I mentioned earlier that we just opened Estrella Vista. 4 different regional agencies were involved in that project, and it allowed us to leverage resources, whether we also have the Family Resource Center, family housing in my neighborhood that is an Emeryville property, but an Oakland program. And so I think there's a lot of collaboration that can go. As for the supervisor, I'm just gonna say bye-bye. That was a nice idea, but no thank you. I think we had some decisions we had to make this week at council that showed the state really tied our hands as to what we can do. And I think there's a lot of local things that are really important, and that the city needs to be able to have the flexibility to develop and grow, and we can partner with our neighbors. That's the nice thing. And again, I'll compliment my 2 colleagues here who work really well with our cities and neighbors and are really part and connected to that community, to our regional community. And so I don't think that that's a good idea.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think the question speaks to broader issues, which is the fractious nature of governments. And the idea isn't limited to city governance, right? There are 29 transportation agencies across the Bay Area, and there's a movement through seamless Bay Area to unify those. And it doesn't necessarily mean the full consolidation of them. It means coming up with a uniform language and system for people to access transit seamlessly. The same is true for housing applications. There are 29 sites in the city of Emeryville that have below market rate housings, but you have to apply individually to each of them. And the city went and applied for a grant from HCD to try to create a uniform application process so that people who want to find affordable housing don't have to literally apply to every single place in the city. They can do a uniform application and apply to each building through one click. And so I think cities are similar. Cities and counties need to work together, and there are examples of where we do that well. But I think the notion that cities are going to consolidate, that's actually a very complicated issue as it relates to labor laws and taxation. And so I don't think that's probably going to happen anytime soon.
Thank you. Ali?
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues that I don't think that's a particularly viable or popular idea. And in addition, I think, we should turn this back on the county supervisors and say, hey, you guys have a giant pot of money for mental health care, for homelessness issues, and we as cities don't feel like we're getting the level of coordination we need to adequately address those concerns. I'd love to see more leadership coming from the county level to address these regional issues, because they are not isolated and siloed city to city. I would love to see the county step up on those two topics, and they have the money to do so.
Thank you. For our next question, defunding the police has become an anthem of progressive activists across the East Bay and the country. Does this apply to our Emeryville PD, and to what degree would you support this? We will start with John.
I think the question about how to allocate resources between different departments within a city is a prudent question to ask, and there's an appropriate time to have that conversation. As we go into budget review with COVID, I think it's just one dynamic that you have to consider when you're looking at the full budget of the city. The city's budget picture has been evolving pretty rapidly. As the chair of the budget committee, we did a budget allocation, augmentation, and amendment in May to confront the quarter of losses that we sustained when the pandemic began, and those have continued. Different revenue streams have stabilized. Some of them have returned to close to normal. Some have a very long timeline before they return. And I don't think it makes a lot of sense to have a conversation about what we can and cannot fund until we know what money we have. And so I'm open to having conversations about what the appropriate funding and structure of all departments in the city is, but only after we have a full understanding of what it is our revenues are.
Thank you. Ali?
Thanks. I think a lot of the rhetoric I've heard about people discussing defund the police is quite reductive. I don't think what the movement is asking for is simply to slash police budgets and get them off the streets. I've done a lot of reading on this, and what people are asking for is a more holistic approach to city budgets to make sure that the problems that cause crime are being cut off by providing more access to affordable housing, better career opportunities, more transit-oriented design, those kind of things that can actually do that. So again, this is a complex budgetary question, and again, back to the county, if there was rapid response mental health care crises, we'd probably have less police force responding to those calls, and that would be a great place to start looking at how can we shift some of the burden out of those departments to appropriate healthcare professionals.
Thank you. Christian?
I mentioned earlier that we passed a public safety measure. And when we passed that measure, when we put it on the ballot, people passed it. So about a year ago, just a little over that, I said, let's not just look at adding more officers to the street, but let's talk about putting social workers on the city payroll so that we have people who can interact with our community, who are the ones that are struggling and who are having different issues that are not necessarily criminal. And so for me, when we talk about the defund the police movement, I think it goes to what Member Medina and Member Bowders just said. It's about allocating resources that we know that are effective in ways that are important. I can't tell you the number of calls I get to arrest people because they're not wearing masks right now during COVID. And that doesn't solve the problem. That doesn't help us. We need to do education. We need to do support. We need to do counseling. Putting people in jails has just shown how it makes problems worse. And so when we talk about defund the police, it's really about putting resources to help find solutions.
Thank you. So when it comes to homelessness, what strategies would you say are working and which are not? And are you considering any different tactics and policies to reduce homelessness in the area of Emeryville? And we will start with Christian.
I think homelessness is one of the biggest failings of our nation. When I leave my house, there's a gentleman who is unhomed who frequents my neighborhood, and I saw him the other day as all of this was going on. He happens to be a man of color, and he was wearing a brand new crisp Black Lives Matter t-shirt that somebody had clearly given him, but he didn't have shoes and his pants were torn up. And I saw him and I thought to myself, if we're going to say lives matter, whether they be Black lives or all lives, why is it that his life isn't important? And why aren't we doing more to help support him? And we need to do this in a regional approach. We need to increase our mental health services. As Ali has said, the county has funds for this. We need more supportive housing, you know, and I cannot thank Mr. Bowders enough for his active efforts on this. We need to restructure our criminal justice, and we need to deal with these situations. So I don't know that I answered the question as much as I talked about sort of my overall philosophy on this, but it is just a central issue.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that there are some things that we're doing well, but I would like to note that Councilmember Medina, I think, really spoke to this when she talked about county investing in mental health services. That's an important component. A lot of people don't understand the differences between local government and county government responsibilities on addiction and mental health service funding. But the city of Emeryville has done several things. In 2018, we tripled the amount of funding that we provide to our contract workers from Operation Dignity to do street outreach work. I personally meet with them. I've gone and done visits at encampments. I've talked to people. I volunteer regularly at ECAP. And through those conversations and partnerships, in 2018, I had a conversation with Mayor Schaaf. We devised a plan together to help basically provide services to people who were at the Home Depot encampment, which was one of our largest encampments, and provide them access to the compassionate cabins. And in return, we took our property at the rec center at 4300 San Pablo and turned it into the family front door to house homeless Oakland families. And those are the types of solutions that we need right now. We need partnership between cities in order to continue the work to address the unhoused need.
Great, thank you. Ali?
Yeah, I'm at the point of sounding like I'm just echoing my colleagues. They're saying the right things. There's some data-backed things that help solve the homelessness crisis. That's providing housing, providing supportive mental health care, and coordinating with our other cities, because this is a regional issue. And we're actively working on doing those things. We have a $50 million affordable housing bond that we've passed, and we have some developments coming online where we can make a further dent. I think one of the biggest things we can do is continue to call upon our role, people who have worked with our fellow elected officials across the region, and call for more funding and more active investment for the homelessness crisis from the state and county governments as well.
Thank you. The next couple of questions touch on those points exactly about affordable housing. And so I'd like to give you all an opportunity to speak a little bit about Measure C and what you expect that will do in terms of building affordable housing. You know, how can you make sure that that money is used efficiently and that it'll be able to provide the housing that's needed, essentially. And if we could start with John, please.
So just to be clear, what's the question is just what do
yeah,
I think about Measure C?
Yeah, plan for Measure C, you know, how you expect you'll use that funding will be used and used efficiently, I guess.
I see. Okay, so Measure C has an oversight component, and the City Housing Committee will be one of the committees, along with the Budget Advisory Committee, resident-based committees, who will provide oversight. Measure C is going to be used to help take off the books a number of redevelopment purchased city-owned parcels that are restricted to affordable housing. So we purchased during the redevelopment era properties on the Christie corridor up there by Christie Park. There's 3 parcels there. We own 4300 San Pablo. We are in an agreement where we've given a $2 million zero interest loan to RCD for 3600 San Pablo. There are a couple other smaller sites in the city that are owned by the city, for which when redevelopment went away, the city had no funding source to do anything with. But under redevelopment law and wind down law, we have an obligation to still put something on the property. So Measure C is going to first go to helping make sure that we build housing there, and that will allow us to draw down Section 8 vouchers, federal grants, low-income housing tax credits, and other types of finance to basically build as many units as we can on those properties first.
Thank you. Thanks. Ali?
Yeah, in addition to looking to use city-owned parcels, which is a fantastic strategy. We have also upzoned San Pablo to make sure we can provide density in that kind of housing, which again reduces the cost per unit and allows us to create transit-oriented development, which is incredibly important for getting people to work. Another important thing we've done is removed parking minimums. Parking minimums lower the cost of building housing because now we don't have to build one parking space for every housing unit. So we've done some really proactive things around affordable housing to make sure that this money will be used the absolute right way. Our city has actively worked with other agencies in Estrella Vista and 3600 San Pablo to find matching grants and funding. We will be doing that with Measure C funds as well to really leverage as much as possible and get as many units of housing as we can.
Thank you, Christian.
You know, I'm going to echo what my colleagues said, and I'm going to say it's about leveraging the funds that we have identified and the properties that we have. And I just want to commend John. One of the things that we have talked about at the 4300 San Pablo site, which we have upzoned, is making sure we're not only serving our seniors, but also looking at foster youth who have aged out. So when we talk about reducing crime, when we talk about reducing homelessness, we are talking about kids who turn 18 and have very little support. California's gotten better on this, and I don't want to get into the weeds on all the wonderful law changes. But this idea of finding housing for adults who have no family that have resources is one of the more important things that we can do. I've been working with HACA, the Housing Authority of Alameda County, to make sure that they have vouchers for aged out foster youth as well. So as that project comes online, we're able to support, they're kids to me because I'm so old, but as they become adults.
Your time is up. Thank you. I apologize if you can hear music next to my house. The pandemic has ravaged revenues of local governments that rely on sales tax, occupancy tax, and car room taxes. What sacrifices and services or tax increases should Emeryville residents be prepared to make during the economic recovery? And that question is going to start with Allie.
Thank you. So this question was obviously tailored for Emeryville because those are three of our key tax revenue sources. Well, what we can expect is that we're walking into a structural deficit. So for this year, we're looking to use one-time funds to plug some of those holes. And moving forward, we're going to need to look at revenue raising measures if we're going to maintain the same level of services, looking at budget allocations and how we structure our budget, and perhaps looking to take some staff positions and finance them through our capital improvement plan for those large-scale public works projects. You know, I don't want to be alarmist and say we're going to cut a ton of positions. We're going to work really creatively as we have in the past to make sure that we are not going to cut the services that our residents rely on. We provide a high level of service and we want to keep doing that. That's a high priority for our city. It's going to take a lot of creativity, and I think the five of us are going to be working very diligently this year on that budget.
Thank you. Christian?
So I think this is going to be the biggest issue facing us over the next year. Sorry, I've got a motorcycle now. But to echo what Member Medina said, one of the things that we don't talk about enough is the City Council has put in place a staff. And not only do we work well as a team, the five of us, but we work really well with the city staff. And so we're looking at this in a very proactive way. We have had some reserves that we've been able to use. We've had some one-time funds. I'm also looking at the projections for our sales tax revenue, and while the sky is falling, it's not falling as much as we thought it was. I can't speak to card room and hotel taxes on the same way of that. So we're going to be very creative and very thoughtful. And I want to echo what Member Medina said. We're not going to go in and slash. We're going to be very surgical and very thoughtful. And I think we will weather this storm very well.
Great, thank you. And John?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with my colleagues, and I'll add the following things. So the city of Emeryville is very fortunate. It's the only city in Alameda County that got an A from the state auditor for its financial practices. And we're the beneficiaries of a couple things. Councils before us and through us have upheld a practice of keeping a 50% general fund reserve for uncertainty periods. And since the three of us joined the council, we've adopted additional practices that have resulted in us creating a Section 115 pension trust, which puts money aside for us to be able to pay against unfunded liabilities during a rainy season. We've also created funds from our corporate transfer tax or commercial transfer tax to sock money away. And so when you look at the revenue streams, the sales tax looks pretty resilient, actually, surprisingly. The hotel tax is the one that's going to really struggle for a longer period of time. And our goal is to build a bridge between now and when the recession ends. And so that's going to require us making diligent, small amounts of reserves, coupled with some changes to contract practices, coupled with some changes to services, in very incremental steps annually so that we can get from here to the other side of the recession.
Thank you. Allie?
I answered the question.
Did you start? You started. Thank you. We will start the next question with Christian. So Bay Street has been hit especially hard by the pandemic with many closures and vacancies. What can the city do to ensure this doesn't become a ghost mall and preserve it as a resident amenity and contributor to our tax base?
So I think this is one of the things that we see regionally and nationwide, and retail itself has become the most impacted by both COVID and the changing economy. So when we look at Bay Street, I talked about this at a council meeting the other day. We've got to be very thoughtful as we go forward. I know our economic development team has been working with them very closely, and we have to look at their zoning to make sure that they're able to adapt to the new economies that are coming. We need to look at keeping it going and being supported as best we can. But there are going to be challenges at Bay Street. When the new pedestrian bike bridge opens up, that will help. But it's going to be, the death of retail was accelerated by COVID, but also overly exaggerated. It's just about adapting to the new economy and making sure your business model fits. The Apple Store is thriving there, and businesses like that will continue to do that. So we just have to make sure that we support them.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. Yeah. So Bay Street, I think my colleagues and I probably have all at different points had conversations with the ownership of Bay Street. I think they recognize that the model they have and the client base that their current tenants attract is not going to be something that is probably as successful as they had hoped in the long term. And I know that they are in active discussion with us and others in private about what they can do to modernize the site and to make it adaptable, as the mayor said, to other uses and things that would help make it economically successful and a vibrant part of our community. And I know that the city council is generally supportive of that. We have zero desire among all of us, I think it's fair to say, to see empty storefronts in our city. But we understand that the economy is changing rapidly and the consumer market is also changing rapidly, as the mayor noted. And so as long as we remain the flexible and nimble city that we've been in responding to these types of issues when commercial property owners come to us, I think we'll be able to adapt.
Thank you. Allie?
Yeah, as was touched on briefly by our mayor, we're building an enormous bridge there, and so we are certainly hoping we're not building a bridge to nowhere or to ghost town. Fortunately, on the other side of that bridge, Sherwin-Williams development is also building a lot of housing, so there's going to be more people living just a 5-minute walk across the street from that Bay Street. Personally, I hope that does a lot to bolster it and that they're able to find local serving retail options that will attract people in our increased density in that area. We could have potentially other large scale business developments in that same region, and that could also bolster the economic forecast for Bay Street. It's going to be difficult. We're in a pandemic recession. And listen, I think I graduated high school right when the first recession hit. I saw a lot of malls close, but I believe Bay Street is in a great location. I think we're going to work with them, and ultimately, I have a lot of optimism that they'll be able to adapt.
Great, thank you. So, question here: parents that speak with the evil eye say that they don't have the luxury of owning a single-family home and are actively considering leaving Emeryville when their children reach school age. The reasons are our housing stock, deteriorating public safety, and an underperforming school district. Do you have concerns over the family-friendly direction of our city? And that question will start with John.
I share some of those concerns, not all of them. The single family housing stock, there's not going to be new single family housing stock, if so to speak, outside of the footprint that currently exists. This is a 1 square mile city. The general plan makes most of it multi-family residential. So the single family neighborhoods that we have are small. That's just the reality of the city by way of its geography. The school district, I do not like the school district. I do not think the school district has done a good job. I do not feel that the school district has the leadership it needs to be competent. I'm not an educator, so I won't pretend to know everything about it, but from the meetings I've had and the things we've worked on together, the school district has a lot of challenges of its own that it needs better leadership to address. And as to public safety, I disagree with the general assessment that public safety is bad here. In fact, if you were to compare public safety metrics between us and our neighboring cities, you might be surprised to see that we don't have the violent crime counts that other communities have. And when you consider that this is largely a city where people come to work or visit, it explains through some of that as well.
Thank you. Thanks. Allie?
Yeah, I'm going to echo. I'm not sitting here coming at you live from a single family house. I'm coming at you live from a loft because that's what's in Emeryville, because we have a lot of converted warehouse space. There's not going to be a sudden resurgence of knocking down apartments and building single family homes. That's simply not the city this is. However, there is going to be, as we increase our density, more 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom houses available, given our current ordinance for 2 and 3 bedrooms for certain sizes of development. That is a family-friendly ordinance. The school district, yeah, I mean, they're not here tonight. They're not here to talk to the public about their test scores, and I think that's a conversation that could be had publicly. As for public safety, I agree with Councilmember Bowders. Our metrics are different because our daytime population, until the pandemic hit, swelled to 3 times our evening population.
Thank you. Christian?
I am coming from a single family home, and I think I'm the only parent on this panel, the council members. There is another two other council members who are not here are also parents. I bought a single family home in Emeryville. I think I might be one of the last people to do that. I don't even have an ADU on my property. I'm that old school. But that said, this is not that town. You know, public safety numbers, if you want to talk about our public safety numbers, you have to realize we're Las Vegas. We have more people who don't live here than do at any given moment. And so our numbers are, when they're reported out, sound worse than they really are. I've lived in town for 15 years, and I can tell you my street is safer now than it was when I bought my house. My neighborhood is safer now than when I bought my house. I've lived for 17 years. Wow, I'm old. As for the school district, I think this is the exact opposite of the city. We've shown how being a city that's small and nimble and able to adjust is great. Schools need student population. We don't have one to support the district, and the district struggles to support the kids it does serve.
Thank you. Actually, that was going to be my next question, so good timing. School board, in the past, apparently, you've had a challenging relationship with the school board, and so the question is, what would you like to see, even though you don't have, of course, control over the school board itself? And we'll start with Allie.
You know, the last election cycle, I spent a lot of time working for school board candidates that I had hoped would change paths. You know, we threw them a joint fundraiser, I knocked doors, I phone banked, because I deeply care about the quality of education that students are getting in Emeryville. My mother is a teacher. She has taught in some low-income school districts in the past, and I have attended some low-income school districts in the past, and I've seen the difference in educational quality, and it saddens me that we are providing such poor quality education to our children. You know, I wish for our school board is that people who really care, who will enact data-backed policies, not just saying we should have a cop on campus because that'll make kids learn better. It doesn't. There's no evidence for that. People who are serious about leading our school district, I would encourage those people to run. I would encourage those people to contact me. I will help them.
Thank you. Christian?
Yeah, the city has reached out and bailed out the school district on numerous occasions, and every council member I've talked to has really put their hand out and say, how can we help you? What do you need from us? And as I think about the economic times we're in now, and I look at what's going on, until there's some significant changes, that's not going to happen for a while. And so we're in a partnership with them. I'd love to see it work, but it hasn't. I don't trust their leadership, as Member Bowder said earlier. I don't know the next steps. I've been an educator for a long, long time. And until you're willing to admit you have a problem and that you're not doing your job, you're not able to fix it. And so there's some really difficult conversations the district needs to have with itself about saying, you know, I served on the school board for 2 years and I couldn't do it because the dysfunction was so great. And they have money, they have facilities, they have quality teachers. I don't understand. It's clearly a leadership gap.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I'd point to three things that I would cite as my frustrations. As the mayor has said at numerous of our joint meetings with them, he refers to me as the diplomat to them, but even diplomats lose their patience over time. And when we put Measure C forward, Measure C was designed to build affordable housing. Affordable housing brings families in, and the school district needs families because the local funding formula for schools depends on families, yet they refuse to endorse Measure C. The school district has a budget crisis, and the school district has asked for 2 parcel taxes in 6 years, yet they came and asked us to fund police officers in an entire school district of K through 12 that has less than 780 people. They do not understand fiscal priorities and what the needs of their own student body are. And then finally, they came and they said they wanted me as the representative to ACTC and the liaison to the Emory Ground to bring Emory Ground services directly to the school. Yet Emeryville, after I got Emory Unified into the first group of schools for the Safe Routes to Schools program and the free transit bus pass, has the lowest bus use. The school does not promote it, does not support it, and did not pay the PBID for 15 years.
Thank you. You also mentioned rent control earlier. So there is a question about, would you support rent control in Emeryville? Why or why not? And we will start with Christian.
Yes, I would support rent control in Emeryville. And, you know, the cost of rent in the Bay Area has greatly outpaced income. And most people who are end up in rentals for long term end up eventually being on a fixed income. And so until we have a mechanism in place to help keep them in their homes, we talked about the families leaving. You know, if you have a place and it is rent controlled, it allows you to stay there longer and grow your family. Otherwise, if your rent goes up, you're going to go cheaper places in the suburbs that have more amenities for families. So when we talk about rent control, yes, I support it. And I can say that because I am a landlord myself and have a house that I rent, and I don't raise my rent until my tenant leaves.
Thank you. John?
Yes, I support it with a nuance. I support rent control, and I believe everybody should have rent control as an option in their cities. The challenge is that there are some legitimate issues with being able to build new housing, which the city does a lot of, and do that at the same time that you have a rent control statute. So for me, it just depends on when rent control obligations attach. And I think that there's a point where housing ages into being rent controlled, and that should be somewhere between 10 and 15 years after construction. So current rent control statutes basically say if the house wasn't built before 1995 and it's not a multi-unit building and a bunch of other conditions, it's not eligible. Less than 10% of housing in Emeryville is eligible right now. But I actually believe that having a phased-in approach where housing consistently evolves and moves into being eligible for rent control is the proper way to ensure that we are building rent stability for our community and preventing displacement long-term.
Thank you. Allie?
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. I support rent control. I think Costa-Hawkins has done a lot of damage. However, I agree with Councilmember Bowders. This is a nuanced issue. I spent a lot of time reading studies of the impacts of rent control on various cities, and it's pretty obvious that it's not a silver bullet. How you implement it does matter. Emeryville has a history of being nimble and flexible, and I think Councilmember Bowders mentioning a phased approach would be something we'd consider, because sweeping rent control tends to help existing tenants and cause more difficulties for future tenants as cities increase density and population growth. And so we need to make sure that we're building for the future and our policies predict what's going to be happening in 10, 20 years down the road. So, I hope that voting goes away where we can have the rent control conversation in Emeryville sometime.
Thank you. For our next question, we will start with John. Some residents have concerns about the cleanliness and safety of the area under the freeway where homeless encampments now exist. Although I'm not positive that this area is part of Emeryville property, how do you think that this concern should be addressed, and what services can be provided to assist these people?
Which freeway are you referring to?
I think that we are referring to the pathway that goes through down to the marina. That's why I said I wasn't sure if it's Emeryville.
Yeah, there's no overpass there. So if the question is about the encampment I'll assume it's about the encampment at the Berkeley Marina. I've been to this encampment not less than a dozen times. I have met with staff at least a dozen times. I have met with Caltrans in the city of Berkeley. And just as I offered Mayor Schaaf in 2018 and she accepted my offer to deal with the Home Depot, I made the same offer to the city of Berkeley. The city of Berkeley declined our offer to partner and join resources together and work on that. Berkeley believes it's a Caltrans problem. And the reality is that about 90% of the encampment is in Caltrans jurisdiction based on parcel maps. And Caltrans, there is going to be a development at the Nady site. It is set to break ground sometime in January. And Caltrans has very strict rules for the removal of people from their property. We have to develop a housing plan for them. And so the city has been working to meet Caltrans obligations. We cannot simply remove anybody, even though they're not in the city limits, in order to be prepared to do demolition and site dredging for the construction. The city has to work with Caltrans to come up with a plan because Caltrans doesn't provide housing services. And that requires us working with Berkeley as well.
Thank you. Allie?
Yeah, I agree. I'm sitting here trying to picture off ramps and which camp they might be referring to, and I think it is that one. Yeah, it is. I think I end up saying a lot to residents when they ask, like, how come the city doesn't do something about it? It is mostly within Caltrans jurisdiction. We have repeatedly reached out to Caltrans. We have asked for plans to do cleanup. And it is difficult to work with such a large agency that is overstretched. They have a lot of responsibilities. I do think they are far behind on dealing with keeping our roadways clear and pedestrian walkways safe. And so I look forward to coming up with a plan when the Navy site is developed. I also would I think we need to continue to reach out to Berkeley for a partnership because this is a border issue. We've had success on these regional partnerships before, and I think this could be a really excellent chance for us to work together to clear out something and help our neighbors get into the supportive housing they need.
Thank you. Christian?
You know, I can really only echo what my two colleagues have said and talk about my experience dealing with this issue. You know, as mayor, I sit on all the mayors get together monthly to talk about regional homelessness and trying to work with the county to leverage their services. But I've run into the same issues, both with talking to staff about our negotiations with Caltrans, talking to Berkeley, even though Berkeley's mayor is one of the ones leading the homeless subcommittee meetings. It has just been such a challenge to get this regional approach together, but it's coming with the development. I know our staff is doing what they can. And I'm just going to echo what my colleagues said is we're dealing with the county's large bureaucracy, Berkeley, who's got its own challenges, and Caltrans statewide, who is just all over the place on this. So thank you.
Thank you. We're going to have two more questions before closing statements. So this next question will start with Allie. What is your vision for a more sustainable, resilient Emeryville in the face of the climate crisis? How does housing and transportation fit into this vision?
Well, I'd be doing my colleague Scott Donahue a service if I didn't say cross-laminated timber. It is a development choice that is more sustainable than concrete. It's cheap, it is beautiful, and I can't wait to update our city REACH codes to reflect the state's recent change. The Building Commission has now issued an allowance for us to build up to 18 stories in cross-laminated timber, and I hope we get one of those developments in Emeryville, and we'll actively work to do so. In terms of sustainability, you know, I'm going to say this because I hear it brought up a lot. Electric vehicles are not the answer. We need to provide multimodal transit access. You can put a ton more electric vehicles on the road and you'll remove a lot of the carbon emissions problems, but you're still going to have 85% of the PM 2.5 emissions that still cause disparate health outcomes for low-income communities who are placed near highways. And you are still going to have the problems of inadequate space for all these private vehicles on the road.
Thank you. Christian?
You know, Allie took my cross-laminate timber because I just was talking to Scott about that when we opened up Estrella Vista. He cornered the architect to have that conversation, and the architects are ready. We are waiting for the state to get behind it, and I know these projects will come online. The environmental and the economic impact will be huge. I'm going to echo what Ali said. We need to move towards transit. I'm really excited to have the bus only lane on the Bay Bridge. I'm really excited as Sherwin-Williams comes online. The Park District did a really good job negotiating a shuttle to BART. I think as we've removed the parking requirements, this thoughtful development process that we as a town have taken, particularly current council, is the only thing that we can do. I'm an electric vehicle driver, and my footprint from that vehicle is not significantly smaller because of the challenges of all the infrastructure things. So it's just being thoughtful in our process, and we do a really good job of that.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. Yeah, on the sustainability component, the city has done a number of things to make the community more sustainable. You've heard some of them already from my colleagues. Other things that we've done, we are looking. We won a state grant for quiet zones in terms of livability and sustainability. That's a huge deal to improve railroad safety and enact quiet zones. The city has been a leader on energy and moving towards better energy choices, renewable energy choices, has opted into city facilities and given residents a movement away from traditional sources of power, which is going to be important to sustainability. And I think the transit piece is a really key part of both addressing climate change and also addressing our long-term sustainability needs. As the mayor noted, we have the shuttle that will go from the Park Avenue district to BART. We have upcoming cycle track on 40th Street with bus only lanes. Ali and I working with the AC Transit Board. We're going to have optimized readers. There's going to be an on-ramp to Powell Street that's going to be HOV only. There's a number of things coming to reduce transit impacts.
Great, thank you. And for our final question, why do you feel that there aren't more candidates running for office? And do you feel it's an issue that this race is running uncontested? And I'm going to start with Christian.
I can't speak to why other people didn't choose to run. I think it saddens me in these days that we don't have enough people running for school board. I know we have struggled to fill some of our committees. Others, we have to turn people away because we have so many applicants. But, I could sit up here and say nobody is running against us because the three of us are so amazing. I have a hard time talking about how wonderful I am, but I can tell you I wouldn't want to run against my two colleagues because they are both brilliant and share my values and are just leaps and bounds ahead of anybody else. And I'm going to say that about Scott and Diane as well. I think I opened this debate talking about how wonderful the council is. And so when we talk about it, we are progressives in a progressive town, and we support the values of Emeryville, and we work hard and have worked hard. And so that is the only guess I have, but I don't have a real answer.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, similar to the mayor, I can't speculate as to why other people would not run. That would be speculative on my part. I will say why I think people support us. I do a weekly town hall. Pre-COVID, at least, it was easier to do. I go somewhere else in the city every week. I have anywhere from 30 to 150 people who show up at the town halls. The feedback I get is very valuable, very insightful. And as recently as last week, and as long ago as 2 years ago, I've had people say, I really hope you'll run again. I really feel like I have someone in city council who listens to me and who is supportive of our community values. And I know that those values extend across the 5 people who are on the council. And when you look at 2016, there were 6 candidates. There was an open field, and a lot of people put their platform forward and gave it their best shot. The 3 of us were elected, and for as long as those of us who are here wish to continue to serve here, I hope that people don't feel disincentivized to run if they want to run. But I'm happy to know that people feel like we're doing a good job. That's the feedback I receive all the time.
Thank you. Finally, Ali?
As someone who's run a lot of campaigns for other people, I'm going to go ahead and start speculating here. I do actually think that being in a global pandemic does disincentivize some people from running. You cannot do your traditional door knocking. I mean, I don't believe that door knocking right now would be a safe thing to do. It just seems much more daunting to run a first-time campaign. So I do feel very weird about this. I got to say, I actually love campaigning. It's what I used to do professionally. And so I almost missed the opportunity to do it this year. I do admire and appreciate the free time, though. And I could say 2 things. I think it's hard to run as a first-time candidate right now against incumbents. And I also think, we have a high favorability rating. I think if anyone really, really hated the job we were doing, they'd probably find a candidate to run against us. So I think it's a combination of those things. I think we've done a lot of community outreach, and every time we put a ballot initiative on, I take that time to go out door knocking and speak to my neighbors, and that is a great way to continue community engagement.
Thank you. Now, before the candidates give their closing statements, I have a few remarks on behalf of the LWV-BAE. Thank you to the candidates for running for office and for your participation this evening. I also want to thank the audience for engaging in our democracy. For further information about upcoming forums, the candidates, pros and cons, and positions on ballot measures, please visit the League's website, lwvbae.org or votersedge.org. We invite you to join the League to help us engage voters and defend democracy. That goes for the three of you as well. We do so much more than voter registration and education. Visit our website and social media accounts at LWV-BAE. The deadline to register to vote is October 19th this year. You can register to vote online at the Secretary of State's website, sos.ca.gov. Remember to vote by mail or at the polls, or drop your ballot in a ballot drop box by Tuesday, November 3rd. We're recommending folks vote as soon as possible. Now the candidates will make closing statements. We will reverse the order that we began with. Each candidate will give a closing statement of 1 minute. So we will start with Allie.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this forum, and my colleagues for working with me. I gotta say, I'm proud of what we've accomplished in the last 4 years. I think collectively we've made great strides for affordable housing, for multimodal transportation, to make our city more livable and healthy. I think we are walking into a next term that is daunting. Yeah, it's going to be difficult to make our city continue to thrive during a recession. I do think we're up to the task. I think we can be creative and ensure that we are setting up the future for success. The thing I'm proudest of is that we have shrunk the timeline for the San Pablo corridor redesign down from 10 years to 3 years essentially for the pilot for the Emeryville section. And it is my biggest goal to deliver a better San Pablo to you before I leave office in 4 years.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. I want to thank the League for hosting the event and for all the volunteers who helped put this together. I want to thank my colleagues for being incredible community and civic leaders. And I would just say that there's a lot at stake in this election, maybe not the Emeryville election, but nationally and at a state level, the future of our country is really at stake. What happens in everyone's daily lives often happens locally, but most of what we deal with is a response to the things that come from above. We are the people who have to implement those things. We are the people who have to pick up the policy changes, the threats to immigrants, the changes to police funding and practices from the federal government. And we have to respond to that with community values. And I am very proud to serve with 4 people who I think accurately reflect the community's values. And I look forward to continuing on the things that Member Medina has mentioned: housing, transportation, sustainability, land use and environment, justice, and community services.
Thank you. Finally, Christian?
So I too want to thank the League. I want to thank you for moderating for us. I appreciate that. It's taking time out. Civic engagement, as I said earlier, is really important in these days. I'll echo what Member Bowders said, that while we're talking locally, there is a lot at stake this election. But I want to end by saying 4 years ago, when the 3 of us ran for council, we talked about our priorities, whether they were labor, equity for workers, whether it was housing, sustainability. In the 4 years I've been on council, the 3 of us have kept those promises and delivered the city in the way that we talked about it. I think we have been mostly consistent with what we have talked about. I made one promise, which was to put city council representatives back on the Economic Development Committee. I served on it. Now Member Donahue serves on it. We did what we said we were going to do, and we're going to continue those promises to reflect what the community asks of us as best we can using our judgment. And I think, and I won't speak for myself, but I will speak for the 2 colleagues I'm here with. They will lead Emeryville in an amazing way. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. If I could actually have my volunteers join me in giving you all a virtual round of applause. Thank you all so much for being here with us this evening, and thank you for folks joining us. Have a nice night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.